Today, I get to interview two family friends. I got to meet John and Sheila with my late husband several years ago during my parents' Sunday school class. And they've been doing Sunday school online, I know, during this time of COVID. In fact, I had a little hand in helping my mom and John and Sheila get up and rolling on Zoom, where we are today. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to two people who, both professionally and personally, give a lot of support and time and care to ensure that there is not just safety, but spiritual well-being for people who need medical assistance throughout the continuum of their life. Sheila, John, thank you very much for taking time today to be interviewed. I'm really glad that you're here. So I'll just briefly introduce each of you, but I'd like for you to fill in if there's anything that I don't say about what I know about you. I'll start with you, Sheila. I think Mom and you and I got to sit down for a dinner maybe a year and a half ago, when I believe you had just made a transition as an RN and really what seemed like a pretty high stakes, high stress position. And you took those skills and moved them into an administrative role, specifically looking at quality and safety within a hospital environment. And I remember us just talking about the importance in your study and your learning about safety efforts and how important that was at an administrative level as well as at the bedside and delivery of care. And John, I learned then later that you have spent your career in the airlines industry and then your second career in hospice as a chaplain, and specifically working for the Hospice of Green Country, which is one of the largest and I think one of the most well-established hospice centers here in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. And specifically, you serve populations that sometimes are not in the line of Medicare and maybe need a little extra support. And it's a nonprofit. And I'd like to hear from both of you today just about the times during COVID. So first of all, is there anything you'd like to say about yourselves that I didn't say about you that you'd like people to know about you?
We're just very good, great people.
Yes, that's for sure. I know that to be true. and I think, you know, one of the things that stood out for me as I've gotten to meet you with my parents over the years is just how dedicated you are to the whole health of a person, their spiritual well-being, their physical well-being, their emotional well-being. And, you know, it really does take a pretty special a special person to attend to all of those. And then to see a couple do that for their community is, it warms my heart, because in some ways, it helps me remember just what grace it was to be able to do that with my beloved Yogi Raj for all those years. Let me just start by asking you, Sheila, of your years, and you attended to safety in medical care delivery first as a clinician and then as an administrator. And I'm really curious if you saw a lot of change over those years, and just in terms of the attention toward the safe delivery of medical care. Would you speak with us about that? And I'm going to put myself on mute because I can tell that I've got just a little bit of sluggishness on the internet here, and I think that will help.
Well, I started my career as an ICU nurse, and then I also did organ tissue donation, where I worked with the donor families at the time of the death of a loved one, and we were going to be procuring their organs and tissues. Then I moved into the part I like most about ICU was the cardiac. So I went back into cardiology nursing. I was the director of 2 of the cardiology units at my hospital for 17 years. And then I transitioned about 2.5 years ago into a position in quality. There was a difference as the years went on, as people learned more and more and we gathered more data. There was more emphasis on not only patient safety, but patient satisfaction, the overall well-being of the patient. We implemented core measures. I was a nurse before core measures existed. Before that, you followed a critical pathway. And then we started looking at the hacks. We looked at anything that was hospital acquired and did our best to try and reduce that. As a director, I worked directly with quality and other people on trying to ensure the best possible safety for our patients within the units. And I think more and more over the years, there has been more emphasis on patient safety.
Sheila, I am really heartened to hear about the progress that's taken place over your, did you say 30 something years altogether?
27 years.
27 years. I know that the IOM,
if you count my nurse aid time.
got it. You know, I know the IOM report came out in, well, it was 20 years ago, almost, you know, to the year. And that IOM report, the Institute of Medicine, for those of you who are not familiar with the report, Institute of Medicine came out with a report about 20 years ago, calling attention to, for clinicians as well as the general public, the need to prioritize safety in the delivery of medical care. And I know that both at a hospital and agency level, it really became something that was prioritized. Unfortunately, it hasn't quite taken root within the organizations, and we still unfortunately do see a lot of incidents that are harmful to both the patients and their family members, but also to the care practitioners. And that's where I'd like to speak with you a little bit, John, because I've noticed when we talked earlier this week in preparation for this interview, there was a particular emphasis and preparation for you as a chaplain who is going often into the homes of individuals who are being cared for in your hospice, in their hospice care. A lot of attention is being paid during this time of COVID to the safety of the patient, but also to those individuals who are delivering care. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your experience has been with with relation to the preparation of safety for both yourself and your peers, but also for the patients that you're caring for?
Well, I start my day out by taking my temperature. I record that along with answering 8 questions about any symptoms that I may be encountering, as well as 7 questions about the people that I've been associated with. And that we do that daily. Every day we work, we send that has to be transferred to our clinical coordinator by 9 o'clock in the morning. She will make the determination seeing anyone that day. And of course, if we have any symptoms, we are not allowed to visit people. But when we do visit, depending on the severity of the circumstance, we subject to donning all full PPE equipment every day with every visit. So that's kind of how we get started. Just for our day's work, we communicate real well with each other by text messages and by emails, and we just really keep up with what's going on in that regard, I do believe. If there's a patient that is critical, of course, we take all of those things into account to, protect ourselves as well as our patients and their families. So that's important, very important to us.
It's really heartening to hear. I'm on this Zigzag For Zero from Southern California to Capitol Hill, and I'm interviewing people like you, and really just people from all different perspectives. And what I'm starting to see as a thread is that we're beginning to understand that if our caregivers are not safe and well cared for, it is very difficult to deliver safe care that really go hand in hand. Sometimes I get concerned about calling it patient safety because it feels isolated, and it really is whole care safety. You have to really look at it from many different angles. I'm curious if either of you feel like this time of COVID might give us an opportunity to help elevate safety moving forward, even when we get on the other side of this. Have you given that much thought? Do you feel like there are some things that we're learning from this time during COVID that will stick and help us in the future, either within the safety field or any other aspect of it?
I think with the additional influence, which nurses wash their hands probably 100 times a day or more already anyway, but I think it just heightens the awareness of safety. I think when we come out of this, the entire world will have a better understanding of how germs are spread and be more aware. And if you're aware and you're conscious of it, then you're more apt to really follow safety standards. So I think it's going to help not just healthcare workers, but it's going to help lay people to understand the importance of hand washing, the importance of really wearing the PPE if you're visiting a patient in the hospital who we have the isolation precautions up. Many times families don't want to put on the gown and the gloves and everything, but it's for their protection so they don't go out and spread it if they come in contact with their loved one. So I really think it's going to help us heighten that education as well.
As a chaplain, I think it brings to mind the scripture that no one is an island. No one lives to themselves and no one dies to themselves. And I think it makes me understand that the world is getting smaller, and what I do affects not only me, but affects everyone around me, and even pass that to their loved ones. So, we need to be aware and remember that, yes, we are our brother's keepers. And that's important to really realize and understand in certain aspects. And I think this is definitely one of those aspects.
I really take to heart those words, and I think if there's something that I'm most hopeful about right now, it is that we are, as a society, and not just in this nation, but many nations, having that important conversation about being our brother's keeper, as you just put it. It's not just about protecting myself from the outside world. It is taking the approach of making sure that I'm caring for you and we're caring for one another. And that if we can get more in the habit of that, it will play out even beyond the virus or the germ or it's even so getting into that place of just listening longer to what somebody's perspective is. This idea that hopefully we are in a place of unifying more now than separating ourselves from one another. And I know that's not universally true, but I do like to think that we're seeing more of that today, and that might be pretty sticky. We might actually get more of that as we proceed. And that has me want to turn our attention a little bit more toward spiritual care, something I know that is really important for both of you. I've witnessed you even your Sunday school with my parents, and just had the opportunity to every once in a while I come into Oklahoma, and you've even been gracious enough to let me come in and sit in your Sunday school class sometimes, even though I'm an outsider. Talk with us, if you would, each of you, about your care for your spiritual nature. How do you help yourselves, especially in times like this when it can be pretty stressful? We can, you know, I know that we're not always getting our preferences right now as human beings. We don't get to necessarily go out and do all the things that we would want to do, or if we do, we have to be, or we can choose to be. We don't, a lot of people are choosing not to, but a lot of us are choosing to be a little bit more protective. What's that like for you, and how do you support yourselves spiritually to be in this time of kind of elevated crisis?
Well, I have been furloughed during this. Our hospital decided they wanted the least amount of people in the building, so they kept the infection prevention nurses and they kept bedside nurses and only the essential people at the hospital. So I found myself with plenty of time on my hands. So I have really read a lot rather than get anxious, be upset, worry about the future or what's going to happen, since I'm not right there every day. I have found myself doing more studies on my own. A friend of mine, her pastor has been doing a Facebook Live every morning, and I have tuned into those, and he gives a word of the day so that everybody has something to focus on for that day. So I think we just have to learn to take care of ourselves. We miss our Sunday school class, especially because we're a pretty close-knit class. So the Zoom Sunday school class, they've helped. At least we've been able to connect. We can see each other's faces and take that time to spend some time together. We can go a little longer than we did when we had class because there's no one following us. So our time together has run a little bit longer most weeks, but that's okay. None of us had anywhere else we needed to be at the time. So I'll let John tell his.
Well, I know I have been working from home a lot since March, and sometimes it's when you're working at home and you still have the same obligations and the same responsibilities to provide care to patients and families, spend a lot more time on the phone. I do read a lot, as Sheila says. The interaction with our Sunday school class is very important. Also, Hospice of Green Country have a very unique work ethic, and we're more like family than we are work buddies. And so consequently, we support each other a lot. We have, Medicare requires that we have a meeting and review patient care, each patient every 2 weeks within that 2-week period of time. We usually do that as a group, but we're doing it via Zoom or GoToMeeting now. And once a week on the IDG meeting we chaplains are responsible for something we call soul candy. And it's kind of like a small devotion. We being nonprofit and interfaith, we try not to get too focused on a religion, but more so on feeding our souls. So we'll bring something. Usually it's 1 or 2 minutes. It is like a devotion, and then we have a moment of silence to reflect on that. And I think that's been very helpful, not just to me, but the whole staff, because they really compliment us a lot on what we bring. So that, and I'm associated with a couple ministerial groups that we meet weekly or monthly, and those are things that bring comfort to me and bring support to my ministry, and just do what we need to do. And I find that I really haven't had the time, as Sheila mentioned that she has, and more studying and more reading, because I do have a job I have to take care of. So I have patients out there that are needing spiritual support. So it's my honor to do what I can to provide that spiritual support to them and be there with them. So,
John, did you call it soul candy?
yeah.
That's awesome. I love that term. I'm going to borrow that if you don't mind.
It wasn't ours. We borrowed it from someone else, but just something for your soul, you know.
Yeah.
That's what we call it.
Well, before we conclude this interview, I'm just curious if either of you have anything else that you think might be of interest for people to hear with regard to how you're, how you're being present with what's going on in the world today, or with regard to the support that you deliver to patients and their family members.
I don't think I have. I think I've pretty well covered it, for what we do and how we do, what I'm allowed to do. And, I have a lot of freedom in my job, and I certainly do appreciate that. It's not a job, it's a calling, quite honestly.
The only thing I will add is when a patient comes to the hospital, especially right now, and they can't have loved ones with them all the time, and if they can, only one person can come. A lot of times family depend on that support. So the nursing staff have to stand in that gap. They have to be the ones to provide that emotional support to those patients, especially the COVID patients, while their loved ones can't be there. And I've heard several stories about how nurses have been the ones that they've held the hand or they've called the loved ones so that they can be talking to them while they're transitioning. So it's a scary thought. So many people are dying alone, and someone has to stand in that gap for those families. And most of the time it is the nurses, because they're being really careful on where the chaplains go at the hospitals.
Well, it's not just the hospitals, it's also the nursing homes and the assisted living centers. Most of those are closed to anyone except nurses, and nurses is on a limited basis. Right now, the social workers or we chaplains can't get in to visit those families or visit those patients. I make a lot of phone calls to the family members of people that are in nursing homes and assisted living centers, and just to provide them some support and let them know that we're there with them, and we'll be with them when we can be. But I think it's important to keep those communication opportunities open and available.
I'm really glad that you both brought that up. Thank you for speaking to that. We're so accustomed as a society to being bonding with our family members, those of us who are graced to have close families at the time of birth and toward the time of death and during times of crisis. And all of that has been disrupted, not just for our daily going on, the goings on, but for those elevated moments where we need the care the most. So I just want to say that if I were in a crisis, the two of you, your compassion, your thoughtfulness, I would hope that you would be giving your prayers my way and your presence my way. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to be interviewed on this Zigzag for Zero that I'm making. I will bring your voices to representatives in Capitol Hill. If there's anything else that you think you want to add to what I say when I'm heading that way to Capitol Hill, please stay in touch with me over these next couple of months. And again, thank you very, very much for being here and letting other people hear from you today.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah. The honor is ours, Vonda, that you would take the time to include us in your journey and include our story in your story. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to this interview with John and Sheila Vanaman. Really glad that you took the time, and hope that you'll stay tuned to the next interview, which is coming up next week.